Welcome to Make Limited Podcast, where we talk about inspirational people, motivational stories, and what makes us better humans. We are looking into the history of these narratives in search of insight into our future. Our podcast will hit all angles of each story from bad to good, revealing what it takes to climb out of the bottom of the pit. We like to say, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. It's our motto, and we talk about it here. Welcome to Make Limited Podcast. Welcome everyone to Make Limited Podcast. I am so glad you are here joining me on another Blueprint episode for our first quarter of the year. If you are new here, welcome. We are super glad that you're listening today. Here you will get insights to be inspired, motivated, and become better humans. So don't forget, subscribe today and be part of the Make Limited Podcast family. All right. And talking about subscribing, a huge welcome to our subscribers. Thank you so much for your support. We could not be here without you. I am your host, John, and today we're talking about the blueprint of Dr. Myles Munroe's life and diving into how he impacted the world. Welcome everyone to Make Limited Podcast. Once again, I am your host, John, and today we're talking about Dr. Myles Munroe. Now, don't worry if you don't know who he is. I'm about to explain everything to you. But before I do, let me first explain to you why we're talking about Dr. Myles Munroe today. Now, through all our podcasts, we're talking about the blueprint of how successful people made successful things. And so Dr. Myles is one of those people that inspired me in my life way before all this started, Make Limited Podcast, and inspired me when I was having a tough moment or a challenging time in my life. And my life was upside down at that time, and it was able to be turned upside right because of what he taught, not only what he taught, but the way that he carried himself, spoke so clearly. It inspired me to turn myself right upside up, if that makes sense. And, we're here today as one of the inspirations for Make Limited Podcast. And I'm super excited to share this with you today. So that's my main reason. My second reason to share with you is because sharing Dr. Myles Munroe is like sharing a piece of value of gold or diamond that you need in your life that will dramatically change your life from one moment to another without you even blinking, and you will see it right in front of you. And that's why it's so amazing today to share with you Dr. Myles Munroe. So without any further ado, let's talk about who Dr. Munroe was and what he did that impacted the world. All right, so let's talk about Dr. Myles Munroe and what he did. Now, before I read, I do want to let you know that to be aware of culture, to be aware that some of the things that Dr. Munroe did were on principles of the Bible. And those are the things that I want you to take into consideration when I'm about to read to you so that you don't think that I'm being biased in any way. These are things that inspired me and hopefully can inspire you to become better humans as it did for me. So with no further ado, I'm going to read to you from the Ungwillian article that talks about the life and story of Dr. Myles Munroe. And then I will go on to talk about how he impacted the world and so on and so forth. All right, so let's start off here with who Dr. Myles Munroe is. Dr. Myles Munroe was a Bahamian pastor, teacher, best-selling author, and international motivational speaker. Dr. Myles Munroe wrote about 60 books and 49 being bestsellers. Dr. Myles Munroe was a sought-after global motivational speaker visiting over 130 countries. Munroe also made his greatest impact to the world as a business coach to Fortune 500 companies, teaching the principle of leadership from a biblical perspective. Dr. Myles Munroe, along with 8 others, died tragically in a plane crash on 9th November 2014. 1954, Monroe grew up in one of the poorest towns in the Bahamas. Monroe lived with his parents and 10 siblings in a two-bedroom house. In the early years, Monroe and his brothers slept on the floor among rats and cockroaches. At the age of 13, he read the four gospel books of the New Testament, namely Matthew, Mark, John, and Luke, as he began to question if God was prejudiced. At that time, the Bahamas was a British colony of the United Kingdom, and although the population was primarily black, all the power and economic clout was in the hands of the white minority, comprising mainly of United Kingdom nationals. By 14 years old, Monroe memorized the said books of the New Testament that helped to give him a new perspective on life, that nothing was impossible. Monroe retold the story that at the age of 14, he found out who he was after a teacher named Mr. Robertson from the UK called him a black monkey. In fact, Monroe added that this said teacher insulted him, saying that he was retarded and that black people cannot learn sophisticated things. Feeling humiliated and inhumane, Monroe went home and told his mother of the insult. Immediately, she got a Bible and instructed him to Ephesians 3:20, which read, "Now unto him that is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the power that worketh in us." This new thinking changed Monroe's life for the better, and he began to prosper after realizing that the power was not in his teacher, but that it lived within him. Monroe educated himself and graduated top of the school thereafter. Monroe went on to attend university and obtained 3 bachelor's degrees, a master's degree, and 5 doctorates, which were bestowed upon him by 5 different universities. Monroe recounted that one time when he visited England to facilitate a leadership training conference and at a book signing at the hotel, he met Mr. Robertson, who wanted him to autograph 2 of his books he had bought. Mr. Robertson, who had by that time was very old, introduced himself to Monroe and apologized for the way he treated him as a student. Monroe said that he responded to him with these words: "Mr. Robertson, don't you ever again underestimate a human." Both gentlemen hugged and kissed. This ending of this initial sad episode demonstrated several life lessons, including a redemptive spirit, the power of forgiveness, and that by being successful, you can silence your critics. Dr. Myles Munroe's ministry was based primarily on the view that everyone was born with a purpose and with gifts to be used for the betterment of humanity. The greatest tragedy in life is not death, he wrote, but a life without a purpose. He also placed emphasis on the kingdom of God and highlighted that the entire Bible, including with the message of Jesus, revolved around the kingdom of God and not a religion. Dr. Myles Munroe's rise to fame was incredible and is truly an inspirational story for ordinary people to emulate or aspire to be. His life story epitomizes the saying that persons should not allow their hereditary to determine their destiny. In other words, no matter how much mankind tries to keep you down, they cannot succeed because promotion comes from God. Monroe's story gives hope to all of us who came from humble beginnings. There's so much that we can learn from Dr. Myles Munroe, so much. And one of the things that I want to inspire you by is that if you ever want to learn from someone, or maybe you can't go because they live too far, and there's someone that you admire, inspires you, and makes you feel like you can do the impossible, there are several ways that you can attain their information. And one of the ways is by buying their books. Not only do you help them with buying their books, but the main purpose of this is not just to buy their books, but you're actually buying what they say, what they believe, and how to achieve what they achieve through the process of their books that they write, or they talk on YouTube, or make a video platform, radio, podcast, whatever it is. You learn from them through this process. And this is some of the things that I do on a daily basis. I listen to, one of the things that he talks about on YouTube. I go on there and I play it for like an hour or so, and I listen to it for an hour while I'm doing something else. And it's so crucial that we understand the process of having a purpose, and not only having a purpose, but being great leaders in that area. And you are a leader no matter what. No matter what, you're a leader, because if you are a mom, you are a leader to your kids. You're a leader to the people who are around you. If you're a dad, you're a leader to your kids, to your wife, and to the people who are around you. Not only that, wives are also leader to their husbands as well, because they are guiding them. They're like the incubators, right? You give them something, you give a wife something, she's going to multiply it, and she's going to create it into something amazing. This is what is so amazing when it comes into being a leader, and how um, Dr. Monroe talks about it throughout his whole life, and how he experienced it and developed it, and early access to understand that purpose. And so even if you're young right now, you're teen, maybe you are in your in 20s, either you're beginning or you're getting out of your 20s, you're in your 30s, whatever age you are at right now, even if you're a teen, or even if you're not even a teen yet, you're listening to this podcast, let me tell you something. You are a leader where you are at. No matter where you go, left, right, straight, back, you are a leader. People are looking at you constantly and seeing who you are. You are a leader. And this is one of the beautiful things that, allowed Dr. Miles Monroe to go into countries and become kind of like counselor, become an ambassador to the United Kingdom, and, be awarded, several prestigious awards by the Queen of England. And it's so amazing how he reached all of this through the process of educating himself, because he knew that the power within him was far more greater than what anyone could say about him. And this is a beautiful thing. We see here when we're talking about his life, when his mom showed him the scripture, and it changed his whole perspective. But that wasn't the only thing that his mom showed him. Actually, there was a point where he was at school, and he brought, I guess, like a I don't know, like a 60 or 50, I believe, or I recall correctly. And he came to his mom and he showed her the grade, and his mom was like, "Why did you get a 50?" He was like, "Well, mom, I got the highest grade in the class." It's like, "What did the other kids get? They all got 30s and I got 50." And he was so excited about it. But the mom said, "Why didn't you get an A? Why couldn't you get the highest grade that you were allowed to get?" And the point of this teaching was to teach his son that it wasn't about her son, it wasn't about what other people were doing in their life that made it okay for him to be okay with himself just because he made it a little bit farther. But it was to the point of him carrying himself out to become the best possible he could. So if the best high score was to make 100 or to make an A, that's what he was going to get, because his ultimate goal was to be at a point where he was getting everything at his highest potential that he could. And I think when we look at life and we see sometimes where we're at, we're discouraged because we don't see ourselves at a high point. But then we turn around and we look at someone else and we're like, okay, well, at least we're not there where they're at, right? And we somehow seem to motivate ourselves to become happier and be okay in the state that we're in. But the point is not to be okay in the state that you're in. The point here is to be a better human where you can become 100% of who you're meant to be. And that is the beautiful thing about this situation, when you can become the best possible version. I know it may sound cliche by the time you hear it now, because you keep hearing it maybe in social media 100 times. People are talking about how you're beautiful, you're amazing, you're this, you're that. But the point is different from saying to acting. From the point from you just talking about it to the point that you're making an action towards that which you want to be, which you see yourself 100%. And we talk about this, and when we talked about Carla in the podcast, when she's talking about, what were you born for to do? Live life like if you were born to do that. That's what I was born to do. And that is the beautiful thing about when you're trying to reach your full potential. And it's the same thing that Dr. Miles, through his whole process in life, he was able to find that at a young state, and then practice it, and then be able to teach it to many people. And in order to do that, he had to go through a process to understand what was his best version. And his best version, he attained it, he became it, and then he was teaching others how to do the same. And it was through a simple principle of him following biblical principles. That was his principles of following. And those are things that I was encouraged as well, right? Because those are my principles that I follow too. Now, I'm not saying that, hey, you need to follow those principles. What I'm saying here is, are you reaching your highest potential? And maybe you need to ask yourself, what are you believing in, or what are you looking up to that is getting you to that state? Sometimes we believe that money is supposed to be the thing that gets us to that state, but the opposite is true. It's not money that needs to get you to that state, it's the ability for you to move and become what you need to be. That's why I'm not for when people are trying to talk about becoming this, rich person by creating a business and doing that and do this. I'm against that in a sense of, if it's not what you are supposed to be doing, then you will be still living a life that is unhappy. Because ultimately you're trying to seek something that will meet your needs. And if it starts working and gets you money, okay, well, let's do it. Let's go. But at the end, or even in between, you're going to find yourself to be stuck at a state where you're not happy. You want to do something else and you're trying to find something else. So, what do we see here with Dr. Myles Munroe? We see that his leadership created a community of ripples, even after his life. It was even more impactful because, the surprising thing is that when I first heard of Dr. Myles Munroe, was at a Bible school, and one of the beautiful things about it is that at that point, I heard the message, but it didn't sink in. Just the name sinked in. Dr. Myles Munroe. That's it. The message was, amazing. It was beautiful, but the name stuck. And then a year later, or about 2 years later, I'm faced with a challenging lifestyle. And at that point, you're seeking what you believe, and you're seeking this, and I remember it was about, I want to say it's about 3 in the morning to like 6 in the morning, and I was there awake and couldn't go to sleep. And I remember looking up, because I remember the name. I looked up his name, and crazy thing, it was just news that he had passed away in a tragic airplane crash. It was super sad because I was like, how does this happen? I'm trying to seek inspiration. I'm trying to seek something that can motivate me to move forward. And then I searched on YouTube, and that's when I found his message. And this is the crazy thing that I see now in social media. And it's so important for us to understand this, that money is a tool, social media is a tool. Our devices are tools that we use in our life, but they're not things that will last forever. What will last forever is the knowledge that we pass to others. Not only the knowledge, but the experience, the wisdom, the understanding that we attain, that we pass to others. I have so many inspirations that inspire Make Limited. Not only that, my life and other things that I do besides, podcasting. It is crucial for me to pass on what I have learned to others, young or old. It is crucial for me because someone needs it in their life. Somebody needs to hear it. Somebody probably hasn't heard it in their life, but needs to hear it. And those are the things that I attain and learn from Dr. Myles Munroe. And not only that, but relationship wise. And it's so crucial because there's so many people out there that are living, and relationships are struggling. And I don't mean just relationships with, the opposite sex. I mean relationship not only with yourself, but relationship with your family, with your friends, your siblings, your loved ones, you name it. So many struggling, and not knowing how to manage their leadership skills in those areas. And it's so important for us to understand these things. And this is what I learned from Dr. Miles Monroe. And through his books, he lives on in teaching people how to reach these potentials that they're living in their life. And so we see a bunch of things that Dr. Miles became an ambassador to the United Kingdom. He was rewarded prestigious awards by the Queen of England, and it's he created his own business. He's I believe it's called Bahamas Faith Ministry Incorporation. Oh no, I'm sorry. I okay. It's Bahamas Faith Ministry International. Um, he founded that. He also founded the Miles Munroe International, which is an outreach center which includes leadership training institute, a mission agency, a publishing company, television network, radio and web communication, and church community. I mean, I'm telling you, you would have to go and listen to a message from Dr. Miles Monroe. But today we're just talking about just the blueprint of what made who he was and inspired him to be. It started all by an insult of a person to another person. Now, if he would have had that insult, would he have been the same person? Maybe, or maybe not. Maybe he would have gone a different direction, you know? Maybe he wouldn't reach his full potential. Now, I'm not saying that he needed that to happen, but it happened to his life. And he had a decision to make. He had a decision either to listen to his mom and be that person who he found to be, or to listen to the professor or his teacher and be, that dumb monkey that he called him. He had a choice. Fall into what people see you or fall into what you know is your full potential. And that was his life purpose, to tell people that you are not what other people see you, but you are what you are at 100%. That is your full potential. Because again, if we go back to the grades, you can make a 30 in your life and you can live on that 30% your whole life. You can be at a 50% and living better than 30% of people, or you could be at 100% living your life to your full purpose. That is the beautiful thing that we learn from Dr. Miles Monroe and the things that he did in his life, writing about, over 38 books, 16 or over 16 of them becoming bestsellers. And I mean, they're translated in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. I mean, it's just amazing the things that he was able to achieve. Some of the books that I've read personally have been the Principles and Power of Vision. I have also read, which one that helped me tremendously was understanding the purpose and power of men and understanding the purpose and power of women. That was just so inspiring that it helped me a lot to step away from the ego and the machista of what it meant to be a man years ago, because it changed tremendously. And all these books that he's written again are things that you can take, even if you never knew him, if you never understood, what his life purpose was. These are ways that you can understand. And so if you want people to understand who you are, if you want people to understand where you come from, and you want to, share your knowledge of what you've learned in your life, books, YouTube, podcasts are great ways to share those things that people can be motivated and inspired to reach their full potential. And so, you know, we we stop here and we end here with the podcast, but it's just super amazing on how one person can come from nothing, from sleeping on the floor with rats and cockroaches, to become a man whose net worth is over $6 million, and create a community, a ministry, a population, you could say, and inspire dozens of countries out there who take his advice, and he's able to share with the world, meet with leaders of the world, and be able to guide them into what is the right direction for their country, what is the right direction for their lives. And that is something that I say is valuable. So if you're looking again, we talked about people building businesses from scratch. We talked about Abraham Lincoln, George Washington being president of the United States. We talked about Melanie Perkins being Canva, CEO, starting from nothing into becoming something. And so many of these people had, humble beginnings, and some of them had well-off beginnings. But whether you have a well off beginning or if you have a humble beginning, you have a choice to make. And this is the choice that you need to make on your own. Either you will go 100% or will you be content to live at a 30, 20, 50% while you're better than a percentage that is lower than yours. It's up to you. So that's where we live with Dr. Myles Munroe. Again, if you want to learn more about Dr. Myles Munroe, you can always go to their website. You can always, search on Amazon for his books. You can go to YouTube, type Dr. Myles Munroe, and listen to a bunch of his messages and speeches that he makes that are just amazing and inspirational. And I believe that will be making you better humans in your life for sure. All right, you have reached the end of today's podcast. Thank you so much for joining me on another episode. I hope that you are inspired and motivated to be better humans. You can let us know how Make Lemonade podcast is making you a better human by going to our Facebook page or Instagram at Make Lemonade Podcast. Catch us on our next episode with our special guest, Will, who will be talking to us about endurance during challenging moments to celebrate the first quarter of the year and lead us into the next. It's going to be incredible. Until then, stay awesome, and I'll be talking to you later. Peace.